Global oil prices have surged sharply with crude rising about 5% to around $82 per barrel, the highest level in over 8 months, following joint U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iran. Tensions have escalated across the Middle East, raising fears of possible disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz, a key global oil transit route. Several major oil companies have already suspended shipment through the corridor, increasing concerns about supply shortages and for the price high spikes. The big question now is, what does this mean for African currencies? And to help us break this down, I am joined virtually by a financial analyst and tax supervisor at Smell Communications Nigeria Limited, based at Lagos, Mr. Olalekon Enyade. Good afternoon, Mr. Enyade.
Good afternoon to you too.
Thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much. It's
All right.
a pleasure.
All right, so let's get straight into it. Historically, when geopolitical conflicts threaten key oil routes like the Strait of Hormuz, which handles roughly 20% of global oil shipment, sometimes market reacts quickly due to fears of supply disruption. Africa, which includes both oil exporters and heavy fuel importers, is particularly vulnerable to price volatility. How serious is this latest oil price spike for African economies at this point?
All right. Thank you for that question. This is highly significant, and because many African countries are net importers of refined petroleum products, the tension in that area could actually disrupt supply as well as oil prices. And this can result in higher import costs as well as pressure on forex reserves, and can lead to higher inflation in the long run. So countries like Nigeria that are still heavily reliant on importation of refined fuel will face economic pressure.
Beyond the macro picture, you said that many African countries, example Nigeria, as well as Angola, Gabon, Libya, among others, import refined petroleum products despite being oil producers. When global oil prices rise, of course, imports bills increase, as you've said. Currencies come under pressure, as well as transport and food prices often follow. We've seen similar ripple effect during the previous global shocks, including the previous Russia-Ukraine conflict. For fuel importing African countries, should citizens be preparing for higher pump prices and a rising cost of living the coming weeks?
That is because if the market is volatile in terms of what is going on in that area, it simply means that when there's a disruption, it's going to affect the prices of petroleum products, and it could actually affect consumers in the long run. Things like food, business operations actually run on petroleum most times, especially in countries like Nigeria. And the dependence on that petroleum could affect citizens. You will realize that even transportation could increase. And farmers that are trying to transport their goods from one market to the other, they will definitely hike their prices because of the cost of transportation. So definitely citizens will be affected.
Does this price increase automatically translate into economic gain for oil-producing African countries, or is it more complicated than it appears?
Well, I believe it's going to be more complicated because using Nigeria, for example, now definitely we're an oil-producing country. So if we export crude oil, ideally we're meant to get revenue from there. However, we just don't export alone. We also import majority of our refined oil. So definitely it's more like a give or take situation. And in the long run, it's really not sustainable. The best way to go about it is to actually invest more in refining our products at home, which we've currently started. But, more work needs to be done to improve productivity.
Aside the oil revenue, with some shipping routes near the Strait of Hormuz disrupted, do you think Africa might face supply chain issues or shortages of essential goods if these tensions persist?
Well, it could be likely that we might face a bit of shortage. It could be likely, and this is because, just like I initially mentioned, the volatile market could affect the players involved in the oil business. So definitely we should actually be prepared to see a bit of shortage in the near future.
Okay, before I let you go, Mr. Lekon, global conflicts often trigger inflation, currency volatility, and slower growth in emerging markets. Already, African economies are already dealing with debt pressures and fragile currencies. What immediate steps should African government and central banks be taking right now to caution the economy against a prolonged oil shock?
To answer this question, I believe that the government as well as the central banks should be more proactive. They should try to invest more in local refinery and also explore the possibility of energy diversification so that we don't have to be reliant on just oil importation alone. Furthermore, the central bank should also focus more on managing inflation and stabilizing the exchange rate. This could cushion the effects that high oil prices would have in the coming period. And finally, the windfall from higher oil prices should also be used strategically to support infrastructure as well as reduce debt.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Olalekon Enyade, the financial analyst and tax supervisor at Smile Communications Nigeria Limited, for sharing your insight on how rising oil prices and the ongoing Middle East tensions could impact African economies. We appreciate your time and perspective.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.